Well, thank you. Thank you to Win Without War and to J Street for organizing this and for your leadership. I'm going to be brief because we have so many distinguished colleagues. We had a huge win in the House, 251 to 170. The amendment passed to prevent this president from going on an offensive war against Iran. It would defund the president from taking any action in Iran that was offensive. We just had a meeting, a constructive meeting with Senator Schumer. He's convinced, as is the Senate, that we are going to fight for this to make sure it's in the Senate. And I am very hopeful that this marks a turning point and prevents another war in the Middle East. I want to now call Senator Sanders, who has been a leader on Yemen and stopping the war in Yemen, and of course passed the first war powers resolution in the history of this country, and has also been a consistent leader on Iran. Senator Sanders.
Okay, let me thank Ro for all the great work, and everybody else is here. And I know, given this beautiful, cool day, you want a 3-hour speech, but you're not going to get it. Sorry. Look, the bottom line is that a war with Iran would be an unmitigated disaster. The war in Iraq was the worst foreign policy blunder in the modern history of this country, cost us thousands of young men and women, trillions of dollars in terms of endless wars. And what we are saying today is that the Constitution of the United States is very clear. Guess what? It is the United States Congress that has the constitutional authority to determine whether this country goes to war or not the President of the United States. And I want to congratulate everybody here, people in the House, people in the Senate, for beginning to reassert our constitutional responsibility. So what we are saying, what will the Trump administration do? You know what? Nobody in the world, including the Trump administration, knows what they're going to do tomorrow. Do they want to go to war? Who knows? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But given the confusion in that administration, what we do know is that there is a possibility that they may end up taking us into a disastrous war. So what we are saying today as clearly as we can, and I want to thank the members of the House for putting this language into the Defense Authorization Bill, is no war unless you come to the Congress and you get permission for that war. That's a big deal. The House did it. I will do everything that I can to make sure that that language stays in that legislation in the Senate. So congratulations to everybody for demanding that the President respects the Constitution. No war without congressional authorization. Thank you.
I think we'll just call on folks as they braved the heat in the order that they came. I know Senator Udall had the amendment in the Senate, and so thank you for your leadership. If you want to say a few words.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I say first of all, bravo to the House, to Representative Ro Khanna, all of the sponsors that are here, Chairman Smith, for putting this in the Defense Authorization Bill. This is a very, very important amendment. You know, the American people don't support war with Iran. They don't support another endless conflict in the Middle East. And they certainly don't support an unconstitutional war. Now Congress is showing we won't roll over for an unauthorized war either. In the Senate, we held a historic vote on my amendment with Senator Kaine, Murphy, who will be here later, and Merkley were also helping and fighting hard on this, along with a number of other senators. Our amendment was to prevent war with Iran unless authorized by Congress. A bipartisan majority of the Senate supported the amendment. That amendment said no to the kind of unconstitutional war that this president and his advisors keep marching us toward. I'm proud that the House has now taken up the mantle, voting on a bipartisan basis to pass the Khanna Amendment. Soon we're headed to conference. Both houses have spoken, and a bipartisan majority in both support this amendment. The will of the Congress and the American people is to prevent an unauthorized war with Iran. The final NDAA bill must reflect that fact. It must include language to prevent unconstitutional war. Failing to do so would ignore the voice of the people and the Constitution, which squarely places the authority to declare war with the Congress, no other, with the Congress. Thank you very much, and great to be with you.
In speaking out in 2001 against the blank check and authorization of force, she's been such a moral conscience for our Congress. Representative Lee.
Thank you very much, Congressman Khanna, and I just have to thank you and salute you for your tremendous leadership. This is really historic, what you have done, what all of you have done, what we have done together. And I just want to also thank all of our groups for really doing the hard work that it takes to get us to this point. It's so important right now that Congress reasserts its constitutional responsibility in matters of war and peace. The Trump administration's, first of all, his decision to unilaterally withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal, a deal he knew was working, really crystallized this for us. The drumbeats of war were very, very loud. The adoption of this bipartisan amendment makes sure that the president hears from us very clearly that he cannot circumvent Congress to start a war with Iran. We must make it very clear that this prohibition must stand and hold in the Senate version of the bill, and I want to thank our senators for that. I'm confident that we're going to be able to move this bill forward to the president's desk. I also want to just say again to Congressman Khanna and to all of our colleagues here, I want to thank them for also making sure that we put into the Defense Appropriations Bill an amendment that repealed the 2001 authorization. That was so important because they were using that also as the foundation and the framework to talk about the use of force against Iran. And also we repealed the 2002 authorization to use force with Iraq. And so the message is loud and clear, and it is just remarkable that we got to this historic point this year. I think everything came together. The country understands the dangers of the use of force and going to war with Iran. And so, again, Ro, thank you very much for your leadership. Thank you for bringing us all together to make sure that this authorization, this message about coming to Congress for us to do our job, we shouldn't have to send that message. This is our constitutional responsibility. But we have to do it anyway, so we did it. And so I think that the American people will continue to fight to make sure that this becomes the law. And thank you again very much.
Thank you, Representative Lee. Now I want to introduce one of my favorite senators, Senator Chris Murphy, who really, not only has he been leading on Yemen and Iran, but is undergoing a huge project to articulate a progressive foreign policy that I think is long overdue, and Senator Murphy has really been leading that effort. Senator Murphy. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ro. It's fantastic to be here with so many peace activists. Thank you to all the organizations for making this moment possible, for guiding the House measure to passage. I'm glad that we had a good turnout here from the Senate to make it clear that you have friends in the Senate that are going to demand that this legislation and this language eventually, somehow, some way, pass the United States Senate and get to the President's desk. Let me just add two quick thoughts. First, if others haven't mentioned it before, remember that there is just a perpetual war motion machine in this town, right? There is an industry built on intervention in Washington, D.C. There are smart people at these think tanks, but they exist to make the argument that the United States can solve, often with military force, every problem in the world. And that doesn't mean that we don't listen to experts. It just means that we remember that there are a lot of people who make a lot of money in this town and across this country when we put our men and women in harm's way. And so it is important that at these moments when you could have a series of mistakes, of mistaken interpretations lead to the outbreak of war, that we set a firm line in the sand. Second, in about an hour, Senator Romney and I are going to have a hearing on the future of American policy in Iraq. And it is important to remember that while the most dangerous outcome of these mindless escalations with the Iranians that the administration is involved in is war, there are also lots of other deleterious effects to American national security that happen along the way. When we called the Iranian Revolutionary Guard a terrorist group, that meant that we could no longer work with Iraqi militias who had any relationship with Iran inside Iraq. It made political reconciliation inside Iraq much harder. It made our diplomats and our soldiers' job that much harder. And it made ISIS's job even easier inside that country. And so when you have this kind of escalation with no end game, first and foremost, the danger is war. But that kind of nonsensical policy has all sorts of bad outcomes along the way, and that's why I'm glad to be here to join in support of this resolution, to celebrate its passage in the House, and to commit myself along with my colleagues to bringing it across the finish line in the Senate. Thank you, Representative Khanna.
Senator Merkley has been a terrific and consistent voice for restraint in foreign policy and preventing us from going from Iran. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we knew we were in trouble when the president chose Pompeo and Bolton as his top national security advisors. John Bolton, who probably played an influential role in the worst foreign policy decision of the last century, and who is famous for his bomb Iran commentary. And Pompeo, who said, we don't need the JCPOA. If they misbehave, we just bomb them. So that's the pair. And what have they done? They have sent over the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Force. They have proceeded to pre-deploy B-52 bombers. They have labeled a section of the Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization. And they have violated the very core of the deal with Iran by turning the screws economically so that the country of Iran is desperate for currency from its oil. All of this to set the stage for the conflict. All we are doing here today is to stand up and say, we stand with the Constitution. We stand with the vision laid out by our founders, who said the issue of war and peace is too big a deal to be decided by any one person, and that includes the president. General Washington, who became President Washington, absolutely emphasized this. He was the one person who might have been able to say, doesn't matter what the Constitution says, we need to have this power of war and peace vested in me as the first president of the United States. But he didn't. He said the Constitution is clear, and he explained why. Jefferson did the same, and when Jefferson was in office, he said we've got to go to Congress to make decisions of war and peace. So now we have an administration that has been laying out the argument that, well, maybe Congress did already authorize with the 2001 authorization for the use of military force, because that was about al-Qaeda, and Iran talks to al-Qaeda occasionally. Maybe we can use that as a justification. And this amendment in the Defense Authorization Act says no, absolutely not. Congress has not authorized war in any shape or form. You want to go to war, you come to Congress. That's the Constitution, and it's on a foundation of very rational thinking about very serious issues. So we know what happens when leaders and air-conditioned officers go to war in the Middle East. It's not pretty, and it has enormous consequences in blood and in treasure and in the reverberations that will extend for generations afterwards. We want that debate, as envisioned in the Constitution, to happen in the House and the Senate. Now, both have voted. The majority in the Senate were for the amendment. The majority in the House for the amendment. So we're saying today, let the conference committee listen to the House and Senate. It's absolutely essential that this amendment be in the version of the Defense Authorization Act that goes to the President of the United States. I'm here to be pleased with all of you in this effort. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Merkley, for your leadership.